So here, now what happens if we have tangent, if we want to solve for a trig equation involving tangent? So we're going to start by figuring out what tangent is for the unit circle. So using what you know about tangent, find all values of tangent on the unit circle between 0 and 2 pi. So we're going to start at 0 and just do the first quadrant. And if we know the first quadrant, we can relate it to the rest. So starting at 0, 1, 0 is our point. Tangent is equal to sine over cosine. Tan of x is sine of x over cosine of x. So if we do sine over cosine, so at 0, our answer would be 0. At pi over 6, 1/2 divided by the square root of 3 over 2 is equal to 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. So keep the top, change the division bar to multiply, flip the bottom. The 2's cancel out. We get 1 over square root of 3. Multiply top and bottom by root 3. And here we get the square root of 3 over 3. So that would be for pi over 6. For pi over 4, we have square root of 2 over the square root of 2, which equals the square root of 2 over 2 times 2 over square root of 2. So keep, change, flip. Everything cancels, so we're just left with 1. For pi over 3, x over y. So our y in this case is the square root of 3 over 2. We divide that by 1/2. We get the square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. Cancels. We get the square root of 3 over 1, which is the square root of 3. And then our last one is pi over 2 over pi over 2. Our point is 0, 1. So we get 1 over 0, which is undefined. So now that we know the first quadrant angles, we can pretty much use these values to find tangent of anything on the unit circle. So just make this look more like a 3. And to do that, we need to know what quadrants tangent is positive in. So tangent will be positive when x and y both have the same sign. So that would be quadrant 1, they're both positive, and quadrant 3, where they're both negative. So 1 and 3, tangent will be positive. So that means that 2 and 4 are where they're the opposite sign, so where it is going to be negative. Because for tangent, we're dividing y over x or sine over cosine. So in division, anytime you divide two numbers that are positive or negative, your final answer is a positive result. And anytime they're opposite, your answer is a negative result. So for our first example, it says use the values found above to solve the equation on the interval 0 to 2 pi. So to do this, we're going to follow the same rules for sine and cosine. We want to get tangent alone. So we are going to subtract the square root of 3 from both sides. So I'm left with tangent of x equals negative square root of 3. So we want tangent to be negative. So we will be looking in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. And then we're going to use the square root of 3. So if we look at our chart here, the square root of 3 is going to go with all angles that are over 3. So anything that is a pi over 3. So we want to look for the pi over 3 angles in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. So pi over 3, so that would be 2 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. And that would be my answer to this question. So x equals 2 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. And since it said on the interval, we do not add plus 2n pi. We'll move on to number 5. So tangent squared of x minus 1 equals 0. We can solve this by factoring or by just solving it. So tangent squared x equals 1. Take the square root because tangent is squared. So tan of x equals positive or negative 1 because the square root of 1 is 1. And you don't want to forget about the plus and minus. So that means that we are going to be looking in all quadrants. Quadrants 1 through quadrant 4 because positive and negative includes all. So now we look at what does 1 go with. 1 goes with all of the angles over 4. So we go to our unit circle. We have pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. So those would all be our answers. So pi over 4, that's in red. Pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. Those would all be our answers to our equation. And now this last one, now we're using cotangent. So just like when we did the reciprocal functions before, that's how we'll do this one. So we still want to try to get tangent squared x alone. We'll start by adding 1 to both sides. Equals 1. Divide by 3 first. So keep in mind when you're solving, it's like you're doing the opposite of order of operations. 1 over 3. And then we square root. So here we're left with cotangent of x equals, so the square root of 1 is 1 over square root of 3. So right now you might want to rationalize the denominator. You might think that you want to do that, but we actually don't because we're going to be flipping it anyway. So now, if that is what cotangent equals, tangent is equal to the square root of 3 over 1, which is the square root of 3. And we forgot to put a plus and minus when we took the square root. So this would also want to be positive and negative square root of 3. So because it's positive and negative, it's going to be in quadrants 1 through 4, all quadrants, and we're looking for the square root of 3. So the square root of 3 goes with my pi over 3's, which are pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. So we would list all of those out. So x equals pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. Oh, and I missed 4 pi over 3. You don't have to list them in order, but just makes things nice and neat. So if you want to try the U-tries, and I will be posting an answer key.